Hi, this is Jason Mefford. I've been a Chief Audit Executive twice and have now spent about 8 years, all over the world coaching Chief Audit Executives and helping to try to elevate the status of internal audit. And I wanted to talk to you today because I've noticed that there are certain challenges and opportunities in the internal audit profession. And in fact, what I'm seeing is that there are certain problems that continue, and I'm seeing people make some of the same mistakes over and over again. So I want to go through and talk to you briefly about how we can actually elevate the status of internal audit and really develop world-class internal audit functions. Helen Keller said, "Alone we can do so little. Together, we can do so much." And, I totally agree with her on this, that a lot of times, as we are trying to do things by ourselves, and maybe in the short term it works okay, but in the long term, we can do so much more together than we can by ourselves. And so what I'm going to really kind of promise to you today as we go through and talk about this, I'm going to promise you that we really can elevate the status of internal audit and our careers as Chief Audit Executives, but we need to do this together. And together we really can do this. And I'm going to go through and share with you exactly how to do that. Now, before we get started, I'm going to just tell you up front that what you are going to hear is not what you normally hear. And the reason for that is that a lot of times what you are normally hearing is very short-term in nature, and it actually hurts you. It's like trying to pound that square peg into the round hole. And, people are telling you, well, you just got to do it. You just got to do it. Well, if you do this, then it'll work. And like I said before, I'm seeing a lot of the same problems and mistakes that people are making. And effectively, you're trying to pound this square peg into a round hole. And as a Chief Audit Executive who is that peg, it hurts to get hit with a hammer and try to get you into this round hole that everybody expects you to be in. But what I'm going to promise you again, though, is I'm actually going to tell you and explain to you 3 things that you can do to actually succeed. But it's not going to be what you are used to hearing. And so because of that, this session is really for the kind of person who is willing to learn. If you think everything is hunky-dory, everything is fine, then you don't even need to listen. Just go on. If you're not willing to actually learn, if you don't want to try to do things differently, and if you're not willing to take action, then you don't even need to listen to this video. Now, if you are that kind of person, then hold on with me, stay until the end, because as we go through this, I'm going to show you the 3 things that you can do to actually succeed. And you're going to actually, by the end, if you stay through to the end, understand the actions that you can take and next steps to really be able to get you to where you want to be in your career. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes, and I love this picture from Einstein, especially because he's sticking his tongue out. And I like to do that too in pictures. But, the definition of insanity, or what he said, is insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And again, as I said, I see people making some of the same mistakes over and over again. And they keep doing the same kinds of things, but they're expecting different results. You will only get different results if you take different action. And that's what I'm going to teach you and go through and talk about today. Now, you may be sitting there and saying, okay, well, what are the problems and the mistakes? What are these things that we're talking about? Let me just jump right in. So 3 of the problems that I see that are in our profession right now, and these are just 3 that I'm going to talk to you about today. But the reality is most chief audit executives are not perceived as trusted advisors in their organization. Now, I know, I get it. We like to believe that we are trusted advisors. We aspire to become trusted advisors in our organization, but unfortunately, most of the other executives don't perceive you as being a trusted advisor. But I'm going to go through and I'm going to explain to you what it actually takes to become a trusted advisor. Now, another big problem that I see is that we're often focusing on the wrong things. And, again, this is leading into some of the perception of us not being trusted advisors. We have to focus on the areas that actually really matter to the organization and matter to the executives if we ever want to be viewed as trusted advisors. And what I see often in our profession as well is that so many people think everybody else is the problem and it's not them. Okay? And in fact, I just had just a couple weeks ago a discussion with the Chief Audit Executive, and here's kind of how it went. This person was very frustrated with their organization and actually had gotten to the point where they got fired, okay? Or there was the executive decision, air quote, to outsource internal audit, so this chief audit executive no longer had a job. Now, as I talked with this person, over and over again, as this person kept talking, they kept making excuses that the problem was with everyone else. And so again, as I said, as I went through, got into more detail, it was all about every other executive was the problem. And by the end of it, it made one feel that every executive in this person's organization was unethical and they were just, deranged and crazy and they just didn't get it. Well, I have a very hard time believing that's actually the case. If you work in an organization where every executive is unethical, holy crap, you got a big problem. But what I'm seeing is so much of the time we believe everyone else is the problem, and what actually is the problem is us. And we need to change what we're doing. That's what I'm going to be helping and talking about today. Now, some of the big mistakes that I see us making, in addition to kind of, like I said before, blaming or kind of, believing it's everybody else is the problem and not us, is that often in internal audit, we do not see the big picture. We get very myopic. It's like this picture here where we're only seeing just what's inside the frame. We get very narrowly focused, and sometimes we end up, kind of hanging on to something that is relatively minor without stepping back and considering or thinking about the bigger picture. And because of that, we do some really silly things in the short term and end up kind of cutting ourselves off. And so again, we're going to go through and talk more about this. But another mistake that I see is people thinking that we can do it alone. And here's the reality. As a chief audit executive, you're the only person in your organization in that particular role. So nobody else really fully understands what you're going through. And as a result of it, a lot of times we think, well, I can just do it. If I just work harder, if I just do this, if I just come back with this audit, if I just do this, then everything is going to be okay. And that does not work in the long term. Doing it by yourself, you will end up failing. It is much better to get the support of others and realize that we need help. It actually takes a lot more courage to admit that you need help than to try to push through and do things by yourself and end up failing. Now, the third mistake that I see often is people looking for a quick fix. Now, it's not a surprise. I've got a picture there of heroin, okay? Because assuming that you can just do some quick fix to make everything better is the same as taking drugs. If you take drugs, you feel really good for a short term, right? And the problem is you have to keep having a fix after a fix after a fix. You realize that you're an addict, and then it's very, very hard. Okay, so don't think that a quick fix that some professional service firm or somebody else is trying to tell you, oh, if you now implement or take this approach, or if you just do this one project, or if you just implement this technology, or if you just do blah, 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 then everything will be okay. There is no quick fix, okay? There are certain things that you have to do, but it's things that you have to do over time. And so again, as I said, I see people doing this all the time, and eventually that will burn out. Just like a drug addict or anybody else, eventually you will hit rock bottom if you are only looking for the quick fix. Now, we're talking about all these mistakes, and don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging, right? But here's the reality. The only constant in life is change. And change takes time, okay? We were just talking about the quick fixes will not get you to where you need to be. And here's why. If we're on a smaller boat, this is still a pretty good sized yacht. But, if we're on a boat like this or on these little jet skis that are here in the ocean, we can turn pretty quickly. We can make pivots. We can do other things like that. But the reality is we're not on those kind of vessels. Usually in our organizations and in our career, it's more like we're on a big cruise ship. It takes a while to turn, right? It takes a while to have an impact in the organization. It takes a while to change perspectives. And the quick fixes will not help you get to that point. Now, the other thing, you've been in your career for a while. If there's certain things you need to change, you're also not on a jet ski. You may have been doing something for 10, 15, 20 years in a certain way. So if you're going to learn and take action and do things differently, just like the cruise ship, it's going to take some time. And so again, that's why these quick fixes don't actually help you. And it's a big mistake that I see a lot of people making. So now you're probably asking, okay, where do we go from here, right? So let's get into this. Here's the 3 things that you need to be able to do that will help to elevate the status of internal audit and help you in your career as a Chief Audit Executive. You need to change how others are perceiving you or us as a profession. You need to work on and develop your executive presence. And you need to belong to a collaborative community. Now, I'm going to get into each of these in more detail because, at first glance, looking at some of this, some of you are already probably kind of judging or making some assumptions about what this means. Like, hey, I'm already a member of the IIA. I go to my local chapter meetings. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about being a part of a collaborative community. So I'm going to get into each of these and actually explain and give you some takeaways for what you need to do to be able to accomplish these 3 things. Change how others perceive you, develop your executive presence, and then join or become a part of a collaborative community. So the first one, let's get in and talk about, how to change the perception that people have of us. Because here's the reality. As I said before, most Chief Audit Executives are not perceived as trusted advisors by executive management. If you look at your CEO or your COO or the head of HR, a lot of times those people don't see you as a trusted advisor. And, I get it. I understand because I've been in that same situation before. But, if we were seen as trusted advisors, then executives would be knocking on your door all the time saying, hey, come help me, please, I need your help. We'd have all of the budget that we need. We wouldn't have to fight for budget anymore. But that's just not the case, right? And because of that, it's because we're not seen as a trusted advisor. If you're really seen as a trusted advisor, you're not going to be having those kind of discussions, okay? So what I want to do now is, in this part, I'm going to go through and show you what it actually takes to become a trusted advisor. And so in the middle, you see those two people shaking hands, and there's really kind of a target on getting there. Now, what I'm going to do is actually build up a model for you and actually show you, kind of build out a framework on what it actually takes to become a trusted advisor. So the first thing, is as we're looking at this, there are a lot of chief audit executives that are tolerated. Now, if you're tolerated in your organization, it probably means things like, maybe you're invited to the executive meetings, you have a seat at the table, people like you, they invite you to different things, but they don't really ask for your input. They know that you kind of have to be there and they kind of like you, so they're just tolerating you being there. And, I don't know if you've ever felt that way. Have you ever felt tolerated in your organization? Because a lot of people feel that way. Another way that chief audit executives feel, they feel frustrated. A lot of times people just, they know what needs to be done, but they don't have a seat at the table. They're not being asked their opinion, and they can see all these things that need to be done, but they just don't get it done because they feel frustrated because nobody is really listening to them. They know what needs to be done, but it's just not happening. Have you ever felt frustrated yourself? Right? Other chief audit executives just feel ignored, right? And they're not tolerated. They're just like completely ignored. And they don't even really kind of know what to do. They don't really know how to get out of this. They just feel ignored. And again, as you look at this, have you ever felt tolerated? Have you felt frustrated? Have you felt ignored? Have you felt any of these things? And if you have, you're not alone, because a lot of chief audit executives feel this way. Now, I'm just showing you boxes right now. We got to figure out, well, what does it mean? What does it mean, and what's the difference between why some CAEs are treated certain ways and other people are treated as a trusted advisor? Well, the real difference here is your level of technical and soft skills, okay? If you are very high on your soft skills, you're very good at communicating, you're a very likable person, well, those other executives are probably going to tolerate you because, again, you've got good soft skills, but on the other axis, we have the technical skills. And so this is why it's really a combination of technical and soft skills. If you're really good at soft skills, but you're not very good at technical, you're probably going to be tolerated. People like you, they don't mind having you around, but they don't really think you know what you're talking about. So they're just going to tolerate you. If you're very technical, you know what needs to be done, but you really can't communicate that. You don't have those good soft skills and really understand the executive politics. You're going to feel really frustrated. And you're not able to really communicate that to people. And so even though you're very technical, people don't really kind of want you around. And, if you don't have the soft skills and you're really not very technical, people are just going to completely ignore you. Now, I'm showing you this, right? And we're talking about, well, most chief audit executives are not seen as a trusted advisor. What does it take to become a trusted advisor? You have to have both. You have to be technical and know what you're doing, but you also have to have those soft skills, be able to know how to navigate the politics, know how to communicate, and be able to know how to show your value. Unless you have both the technical and soft skills, you're not going to get to that trusted advisor level. Now, the goal is to move up to that trusted advisor status. So, depending on which box you find yourself in, if you feel like you're tolerated, well, you probably need to work on some technical skills. If you feel like you're ignored, you probably need to work on your soft and technical skills to be able to get you up there. And if you're just feeling frustrated, but you're already good technically, then it's probably soft skills that you're going to need to work on. So the next one, moving into executive presence. Now, how do we actually do that, and what does that actually mean? Well, there's really three things that you have to balance as an executive leader. And so you can think about this as juggling. If you've ever tried to juggle, if you're just juggling one ball, you're really just throwing it up and down in the air. And that's really pretty easy. If you're doing two balls, then, it's okay. It starts to get a little bit harder, but it's still manageable for most people. But when we get to juggling three balls, then it becomes difficult. And here's the deal. I'm going to go through now and show you again kind of what these three balls are, what you need to balance in your leadership in order to really gain that executive presence. If you're only focusing on one, you're never going to be seen as an executive. You have to be balancing and working on all three of these. So the first one is you have to balance stakeholders. You have to be able to understand, know them, and actually, manage your stakeholders and the relationships that you have with stakeholders. Because here's the thing, right? When you walk into the corner office, you're sitting down with an executive, they're looking at you in a certain way, and you have to manage their expectations, okay? You have to know how to manage, how to lead, and how to deal with the stakeholders in your organization. So a lot of these are going to be your peers or other people like that. Now, when I was, younger in my career, I went into, we had one of our factories was having some issues with theft. And so this was, it wasn't just like petty theft where a carton of product would go missing. No, we were missing full pallets of product. And this was happening routinely. And so we became aware of this, based on some of the data analytics that we've been doing, and realized that there had to be something going on at this plant. So I went out to the plant to try to figure out and talk with the plant manager. Now, the plant manager was not necessarily my peer, but here's kind of how this all works out, right? I was seen as the young kid who was a vice president from corporate that came out, and I'm sitting down across the table from this man who has had 30 plus years of experience in our industry of running manufacturing plants. And so just like in this picture, he's kind of sitting back in his chair, and he's kind of trying to size me up because he knows, again, I'm probably at least 20, if not 30 years younger than this man at the time, because he was at the end of his career. And he's looking at me thinking, okay, kid, you don't even know what you're talking about here, right? So he starts asking me all these questions about, it looks like we are having an issue here. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, but why do you think you can help me, right? And so I'm just kind of sitting there, trying to figure out, again, how am I going to manage this stakeholder expectation, right? So he starts going off and asking me a bunch of questions. And eventually he gets to the point and he says, well, of course, with theft like this, I'm sure, you must have some background in law enforcement or FBI if you really think that you can help me, right? And at that point, when he asked the question, I said, well, no police force or FBI, but CIA experience. And he just sat back in his chair and was flabbergasted and said, okay, well, I guess you can help me. Now, I didn't tell him that that meant certified internal auditor, okay? But what it did was to help manage the expectations of that stakeholder and help them to realize, because I was able to communicate what my expertise was, that soft and technical skills. Because the reality is, the other executives usually look at us like we're this little bewildered kid. And until we can get past that, then we're always going to have some trouble in managing or dealing with the stakeholders that we have to deal with. And the reality is, in most of our companies now, it's like a landmine out there. There's a minefield that we have to be going through and trying to figure out, because people in our organizations are trying to throw you under the bus, and you have to learn, how do we avoid these political landmines? How do we navigate through all of the executive politics that are there? And again, this is not a skill that you're taught when you become a certified internal auditor. Okay? It just doesn't happen that way. You have to actually learn by going through some of the experiences and learning and understanding how this game works, and learn from other people. Because again, if we don't know how to do this, it's just like we're walking through a minefield and all of a sudden our legs get blown off. Remember that CAE that I told you about at the beginning, who thought everybody in the organization was unethical? I don't think that was the case, but part of the problem, I'm sure, that CAE didn't know how to navigate the minefield in their organization. And ultimately, if you don't have the respect and trust of executive management, it's not because of them, but it's either because of what you are doing or how you are being. We are usually the problem, okay? And we need to learn how to get past that and balance that. Because, ultimately, a lot of times, again, when I was telling you about, not seeing the big picture, one of the things that I see chief audit executives doing all the time is letting this theoretical independence get in the way of doing what is necessary and practical. And unfortunately, often we try to be an island. We try to think we're the one that's right. We can't, compromise or do anything because that'll be an issue with our independence. And most of the time, what people are talking about is theoretical in nature, and it's just BS, okay? If you want to help manage your stakeholders, you need to do what is necessary and practical. Now, I'm not talking about doing something that's unethical, but you have to learn how to navigate through that political minefield if you really want to be an executive. Another thing you have to do, is quote from Winston Churchill: "You will never reach your destination if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks." Now, I put this in here for a couple of reasons. Okay, I like Winston Churchill anyway, but in a lot of the quotes that he said, but if you want to get to a destination, you can't be worried about all the people along the way that are barking. Okay, so that's kind of one lesson from this. You have to kind of know where you're going, and you have to go forward that way. But it also brings up the point that if somebody barks at you, you don't turn around and throw a stone at them. And again, a lot of times I see chief audit executives and internal audit in general being negative and always being the bearer of bad news and telling people that they're wrong and effectively throwing stones at every executive in the organization that barks. That will never get you the trust and respect of executives if that's all you're seen as doing. Okay, so the first one that we have to deal with is stakeholders. The next one that we have to deal with as well is our staff. Now, our staff, and the only problem with leadership is dealing with all of the people issues. Now, if you've been an executive for very long, you know that a lot of your day or a lot of your week is often dealt with people issues. Okay, this is part of the game. Now, if we're going to lead staff and we want to have this team that's all in it together and we develop that great world-class team, there's some things that you have to consider, right? You have to find the right people. You have to keep the right people. Once you find them, you got to keep them. But, along the way, there's certain things, and usually we have to do some corrective discipline. Because if you have a staff of very many people, some of the people are not going to be doing things the way you would like them to do. And so we have to understand how to actually discipline or go through that corrective discipline process. And for some people, that's really uncomfortable because you haven't had to do it very much. That's a time when you can kind of reach out and ask people for help. In fact, one of the recent calls that we had for the Chief Audit Executive Forum, one of the CAEs in the group kind of came forward and said, hey, one thing I would like to talk about is I've got this person who's a direct report. And so they were a director level, director of internal audit, that was responsible for a geographic part of this organization and reported directly to the CAE. And as the CAE was going through and kind of talking about this person and kind of the issues that they were having and, didn't really know what to do. I've been working with this person for 6 months. Do I give them another 6 months? What do I do? Blah, kind of going back and forth because by themselves, the CAE didn't really know what to do. And it wasn't that the person wasn't a good manager or a good leader. It's just when you're trying to make a decision by yourself, sometimes it's kind of difficult. And it's nice to just bounce ideas off of other people. And so again, as we're going through on the call for the CAE forum and kind of talking about this, everybody on the call pretty much had the same advice back to the person. Look, these issues that you're dealing with, it's probably, it appears this person is in over their head, meaning they probably should have stopped their career at the manager level. They were probably a good manager, but not a good fit in the director level position. They just didn't have the qualifications, the technical and soft skills to be able to do that job. And in fact, may not have had the capability in general to learn them because, again, as I said, they'd been working with this person for 6 months. And so, what that helps to do is now that CAE could go away and say, okay, now I know what I need to do. And they knew what to do the whole time. They just needed to bounce the idea off of somebody else. And this, again, is part of the benefit of some of the community that we're going to talk about later. But, there's things, again, around your staff that you have to look at, like, your organizational structure and staffing. What are other people doing? What's working for you? Are you doing things like having a shared service group within your internal audit department? How is that working? What are some things that are kind of going on that way? How do you develop good team culture? What are some things that you can do to increase teamwork? Again, by yourself, you can go read articles about it, but it makes a lot more sense to actually ask people who have gone through it and see what was working for them and see if it would work for you as well. Now, another challenge often with leading staff is actually moving from managing to leading. And there is a difference between managing people and leading people. But at an executive level, we have to learn how to lead our staff. And a lot of that goes back into some of the things around emotional intelligence. And the fact that emotional intelligence actually starts with you and you becoming more emotionally intelligent for yourself and then realize how then to lead people using that. There's a great movie called White Christmas. And in there's a song called The Old Man. And there was this general in the movie, and I won't get into all of the things, but the troops, his troops were singing a song to the general. And it kind of goes like this: we'll follow the old man wherever he wants to go. Okay? And one of the lines that's in there says, Because we love him, we love him. And you might stop and think, now just a minute. Military and people in the military loving the general, yes. There are certain generals that the men and women that serve under them, they love them. They're willing to go to hell and back for them and die for them. That's the kind of teams that we want to develop. Not the kind of general or leader who scares people and kind of forces people through authoritarian rule to get them to do what they want them to do. We need to have these collaborative teams. And again, you've got to be able to manage that ball if you're going to become an executive and step into that executive presence. Now, the last one for us to talk about here in this section is really yourself. And a lot of times people don't even think about this, but in order to become an executive, you really have to manage yourself. A couple of quotes here to just kind of go along with this, but here you have this woman flying across the sky doing a karate kick. In order to be able to do that requires a lot of self-discipline. And if we look at these couple of quotes up here, Lao Tzu said, mastering others is strength, mastering yourself is true power. If you're really going to be an executive, you have to learn how to master yourself. And then if we see from Plato, who said, the first and best victory is to conquer self. So we have to spend time actually developing ourselves and managing and leading ourselves as well if we're ever going to get into that executive presence. Now, why most people fail when they're trying to manage themselves is because of this model. Most people think, when I have something, then I can do that and I will become this. Okay, you've heard people say these kind of things all the time. I don't have the time, I don't have the money to do that so that I can become this. So woe is me, I'm just stuck where I am. And they stay exactly where they are because they keep waiting to have something so then they can finally do something and then they'll finally become this other person that they want to be. But that doesn't work. It does not work. Instead, you have to flip it around. You have to be this first. You have to be the executive. You have to be that person and do those things to have what you want to have. So again, if you want to, be an executive, then you actually have to be an executive and do executive things. When you do that, then you will have those things that you want. Because really, until you learn to be an executive and you start being that way, you're never going to gain the trust and respect of the other executives. Okay, so the three things that we have to balance: stakeholders, staff, and ourselves. Now, which brings us to our third point about the collaborative community. So, what do we need to do to become a part of a collaborative community? Well, if you're doing something like riding a bike, and so we've got a man here on a bike, and it can be exhilarating just getting out there, being by yourself, and just going fast on your bike. But it's good until it's not good, because eventually something may happen. Your bike breaks down, you're off by yourself, and you have no one around you to actually help you. That exhilaration that you have for a while and thinking that you can go fast and everything is great, it is until it's not. And when we try to do things by ourselves, we can feel very alone when things are not going our way. That's why it is much better to be in a group as you're going forward, instead of trying to do everything by yourself. So again, if somebody was writing in a group like this, something happens to one of the individuals, what do you think is going to happen? Everybody else is going to stop and help. Now, if it's something that you've never experienced before, chances are someone else in the group has experienced that. And so they are going to be able to help you. I was coaching a CAE recently, and I won't go into all of the details, but let me just kind of paint a little picture for you. There were some serious issues going on with some of the board members and some executives. There was an activist shareholder that was trying to kind of jockey for position in the company and end up kind of selling the company off so that they could exit. And so there were some different political maneuvering at the board and at the executive level to try to make some of this stuff happen. And in fact, this chief audit executive got caught in the middle of that a little bit. And, as I was going through and coaching him, I remember him saying, I've got over 30 years of experience in internal audit, but nothing that I read in my textbooks or in the experience that I've dealt with prepared me for this. And you know what? He's right. A lot of times, all of our experience, all of our learning doesn't necessarily prepare you for something that you're going to go through. But the nice thing is other people have gone through it. And so again, even though with all those years of experience and knowledge, someone else in the group is able to help. Now that's what I'm talking about from a collaborative community. It's not going to, some little networking event every so often, or picking up the phone and calling somebody that you haven't talked to in 10 years. It's actually being a part of a collaborative community of like-minded professionals that are in your same situation. Things like the Chief Audit Executive Forum, a group of Chief Audit Executives who are going through some of the same things that you are going through. Just like in this picture, other people riding along in the race of, our career and our life, so that when things aren't going the way we need them to, there's somebody else that we can gain support from. We can learn best practices from them. We can ask them questions, get answers from them, and really be able to help us in moving forward in our career. Because as I started off with, alone we can do so little, but together we can really do so much. So now I just want to stop and really ask you, as we've been going through this information, is what I've been talking about, does this resonate with you? Are you understanding? Are you feeling this way? Are you seeing how these three things are really necessary for us to be able to get to where we want to be in our career? And if that's the case, then the next question you're probably asking is, well, where do I turn for help? Well, the Chief Audit Executive Forum is exactly one of those places that provides you with that information, with the community, and with the ability to be able to work on yourself and kind of work through these things that we talked about, the soft skills, the technical skills, to be able to get you to become a trusted advisor. Looking at how you balance self and stakeholders and staff and move into that executive presence, and how you have that supportive community around you for when you have questions, when your bike breaks down and you need help, or when there's some, crazy corporate political thing that you've never had to deal with in your life before. Excuse me, how you actually get through that. Because the Chief Audit Executive Forum is a community where you can have frank discussions about the challenges and opportunities of being a Chief Audit Executive, while getting practical advice to increase your executive presence, your influence, and your value as a trusted advisor to your organization. Now, as part of it, there's group video calls where monthly the group comes together to talk about things, to be able to ask questions, to be able to get some education about certain things that people are interested in. It's a place where you get that thought leadership and best practices. because you're rubbing shoulders with people who are thought leaders in internal audit and in our space. You're learning about the best practices that other people are doing at their organizations, the things that are working, and whether or not they may work for you. But it's so much more than that as well, because it really is that exclusive community as well. If you have things between calls and you need to reach out to people, there's a group of people that are there for you. Now, again, as we talked about to begin with, the three things that you really need to do differently is, help change how other people perceive you. Well, again, these are things that the Chief Audit Executive Forum helps you with. How to develop your executive presence and join a collaborative community. Now, I want you to just imagine for a moment and think about, if you were to actually get some help and join something like the Chief Audit Executive Forum. Imagine what it would feel like 3 weeks from now if after you join, all of a sudden you're starting to have better clarity about what you need to do, the steps that you actually need to take to be able to, again, change how people are perceiving you, to be able to move into your executive presence and have kind of that community around you. And imagine what it would be like in 3 months from now if, you started being invited to the table. People started asking your opinion. You were starting to be asked for your help. And imagine if 3 years from now, you were not only at the table, but you've actually been able to elevate the status of internal audit in your organization. And people actually understand, and you really are a trusted advisor to your company. Imagine how that would feel. Would it feel good? Would you feel more at peace? Would you feel like you're actually adding value and having purpose in your life by actually being able to help your organization the way you would like to? And imagine, how grateful you will feel at that point that you took action right now. Because as I talked about at the beginning, if you want to just keep going about doing things the same way, then you're just going to get the same results. But if you're a person who wants to take action and actually do things different, now's the time to do that. Because again, imagine how grateful you're going to be at your future self that you made the commitment to do what you need to right now. So, what are your next steps? Well, the next steps, if you'd like to join the Chief Audit Executive Forum, is to check out the website. Learn more about what it has to offer. And again, the websites are up here on the screen, so you can go to jasonmefford.mykajabi.com/CAE forum, or you can go to meffordassociates.com/CAE forum. On that web page, you're going to be able to see a lot more information about what the forum offers and help you determine if you think that you're a good fit. Now, if you look through that information and you think, this is exactly what I need at this time, here's the process. You fill out an application, and I will look over the application. We will book a time for us to have an interview where we'll go through and actually dig into you and see if both of us feel like you are a good fit for the forum. And if you pass through the interview and we both believe that this is the right thing, then we'll get you registered and get you onboarded and be able to start in the program. Because again, in this program, you are going to get support through monthly video calls, through thought leadership and best practices that you're going to gain, and through this exclusive Chief Audit Executive Forum community. Now, as a bonus along with this, in addition to coming into the forum, if you actually register now, there are some additional bonuses that you will get for becoming a member of the forum now. The first one is a complimentary ticket to the Chief Audit Executive Summit. Now, the summit is the premier in-person networking and education event that is only for Chief Audit Executives. You know, a lot of things that are targeted towards executives, there's a lot of other people there besides Chief Audit Executives. You only have Chief Audit Executives at the summit. And in fact, you get access to thought leaders and world-class expert speakers at the summit as well. Now, in addition to that, you also get the Proving Your Value to Management mini course. You know, I know a lot of people struggle with trying to prove the value to management, and especially someone like the CFO. So again, when you register now, one of the bonuses that you will also receive is this mini course to actually show you exactly how to calculate and prove your return on investment to management. Now, in addition to that, there's also a delegation and productivity mini course. You know, I know a lot of you feel like you're overworked and you don't have the time to get everything done that you need to. Well, this mini course will save you at least 20% of your time each week by helping you to delegate and be more productive with the time that you actually are there at work. And so again, all of these bonuses are between an $8,000 to a $10,000 additional value when you register in the forum now. So at this point, you know, really, I've kind of explained some of the stuff, and now you need to decide which group are you in. Are you somebody that's ready to get started now? And if that's the case, go out to the websites right now, look through them, fill out your application, and let's get started. If you're somebody that needs to think it over a little bit more, go out to the websites, get some more information, and think about it. But I'm going to warn you right now, open enrollment is not open for very long. And especially in our profession, we tend to want to overanalyze and overthink. And as a result, if you think too long, you're going to talk yourself out of it, or you're going to miss the window. So if you feel like you need to think it over a little bit more, go out to the websites, take a look at it, and still submit your application. Now, if you don't think this is for you, that's perfectly fine. This is not for everyone. In fact, we actually turn away people each time who are not a good fit for the Chief Audit Executive Forum. And that's, again, because we have to hold the integrity of the group. So you know what? It's perfectly fine. If you don't think this is for you, that's fine. When things change in the future, we're still going to be here. And if you believe in the future that this is a good fit for you, then again, come back, check it out, and submit your application. You know, because ultimately, as I said at the beginning, we can be perceived as trusted advisors and elevate the status of internal audit when we focus on the right things. And those were the things that I was talking about today. And alone, we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And that's one of the reasons why the Chief Audit Executive Forum is here. And it is the way in which we can work together and make an impact in our profession, in our organization, but also in our professional and personal lives as well as Chief Audit Executives. So again, if this is resonating with you, make sure and submit your application today, because there is limited time and we only have open enrollment periods set for a short period of time. So if this is something that you're interested in, if this is something that you feel like you need to do, then submit your application today. And I look forward to receiving it.